When Paul wrote the letter to the Colossians, it was in the year 60 to 61 CE, just similar to the time that he wrote Ephesians that we talked about yesterday. And he wrote for similar reasons, to protect his brothers from the immoral environment that was around them and to encourage them to fight against the weaknesses of the flesh. So let's open our Bibles to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll read in its entirety verse 5. Colossians 3:5. Deaden therefore your body members that are on the earth as respects sexual immorality, uncleanness, uncontrolled sexual passion, hurtful desire, and greediness, which is idolatry. And we've been told that these expressions convey the idea of totally wiping out these desires. When we sense them coming up in our heart and mind, we slay them, we wipe them out. And it's very important because to fail to do that puts us into all sorts of difficulties with Jehovah, with others, and causes problems for ourselves. Look at verse 6. On account of those things, the wrath of God is coming. So it affects our everlasting future as well, doesn't it? One thing that is highlighted here is how serious these desires can become. They get bound up with greediness, covetousness, which is idolatry. And covetousness has been described as something that is insatiable. It's always after for something that should not have or does not have the right to have. It's ruthless self-seeking, it has been defined as. And a covetous person or a greedy person makes the object of his desire so strong that in essence it can become his God. And that reminds us of the inspired words of Philippians 3:18 and 19, where Paul used a similar expression about those who used to be with him in the truth but no longer were, and he was very sad about that. And what happened to them? Well, their God became their belly, and their desires overwhelmed even their love for Jehovah. And it was back in 1978 that the Watchtower in the April 1st issue said this about this quality of greed and covetousness and idolatry. And it said this: if we become aware of a wrong desire building up within ourselves, we do well to call to mind how precious our relationship with God is and how senseless it would be to forfeit this by making oneself an idolater. So that's a very serious thought, isn't it? That a person could actually start worshiping something other than Jehovah. And that was a very serious sin, even in ancient Israel, wasn't it? This matter of idolatry. It carried the death penalty. But you know, another aspect of the Ten Commandments that carried the death penalty was adultery. So what is the similarity between idolatry and the death penalty and adultery and the death penalty? Well, worshiping an idol, a person would break his covenant with Jehovah. And committing adultery, he would break his covenant with his spouse. So why would Jehovah feel so strongly about that? Well, let's open our Bibles to Psalm 33, and we'll look at the kind of person Jehovah is when it comes to his word and what he says. Psalm 33, let's read verse 4. For the word of Jehovah is upright, and everything he does is trustworthy. And then look at verse 9. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. So the psalmist is saying when Jehovah says something, he means it. And so when a person says to Jehovah, I'm going to worship you exclusively, and he doesn't, it's treachery. It's unlike God, Jehovah. It's like the devil, who is the liar and untrustworthy. So it adds weight, doesn't it, to our desire never to fall victim to idolatry in any form. Now, our comments in the Watchtower that we'll read a little bit later today in the actual printed comment does focus on this matter of marriage and adultery and avoiding that, of course. And what we'd like to do now is just take a few moments and highlight some dangers that could come up for married people and see how that applies to deadening or slaying those desires right from the very beginning so that they do not flourish and cause a problem. One of the principles that we can think about is Proverbs 22:3. We see the danger and we turn aside. So what are some things that we could see as a danger, identify them, and slay them before they become a problem? Well, obviously, what we look at, listen to, and read fills our mind with either good or bad. So we avoid intake of bad things. It only fuels bad desires. But research has shown, and our publications have often commented on, that when a person gets involved in adultery, it isn't always just a sexual greed or the sexual desire that motivates him to go down that path the first place, or her to go down that path the first time. Well, what is it? Well, what is the fundamental function of marriage? It has often been said that the fundamental function of marriage is receiving and giving emotional support. It's a relationship where a person feels loved, appreciated, wanted, and needed in a very special way. And when a person begins to feel that that is missing, then they begin looking for someone who can give them that, not necessarily right away sexual gratification. And that's why the Watchtower, or really the Awake of January 8th, 86 Awake, said this: being a good listener has the capacity for making the other person feel that he is especially valued and what he is saying is of concern and significance to him. So it's this relationship that needs to be guarded, the friendship. And the 1994 Watchtower, the July 15th, added weight to this comment when it quoted a divorce attorney, of all people, and he said, what is the single biggest reason couples break up? And this is what he said. It was quoted in the magazine. The inability to talk honestly with each other, bare their souls, and treat each other as their best friend. That's the main reason. That can often lead to other physical contact, but it often is not the one that gets it started. So now, what can we do to avoid that? Well, we want to treasure our relationships. And it reminds us of an experience that was given in the August 15th, 2012 Watchtower about an elder, also a pioneer, named Daniel, and his wife pioneering. But he was very involved in the congregation, always took on assignments. He had 3 Bible students, men who got baptized, but they needed a lot of help. They were newly baptized. He was busy with other assignments. His wife spent a lot of time with these newly baptized brothers. He was neglecting his wife. She bonded emotionally with one of these brothers. Adultery was committed. But Daniel said he bore a heavy responsibility in that respect. In fact, at the end of the lessons learned, he said this: there is much more to life than struggling to care for privileges to the detriment of your own family. So the need for balance. Pursuing kingdom interests, of course, and an understanding wife or a husband can understand and support that. But there is a balance, and if it oversteps itself, then real problems can result. So we want to do all we can to slay desires when we sense them in ourselves, and it's going to take earnest effort. It's going to take endurance, because as long as we're in this imperfect state, no one can say, I am immune to any of those desires that could crop up at different times. So our love for Jehovah, our love for our mates, our love for our brothers prevent us from going down the path of greediness and idolatry, which only results to harm. How grateful we are to be with brothers and sisters like you who love Jehovah, love their marriage mates, love the brotherhood, and do all we can to stay morally clean. Keep it up with Jehovah's help.